I give her her freedom, as well as that of her children, on condition that she serves me up to my death. Those words were written in 1770. Signed, recorded, preserved. But a decade later, she was described as a runaway slave, hunted down, arrested. So was the man who employed her, placed in prison, and the court would be asked to decide whether those words meant anything at all. Her name was Marguerite Guillory. This was Spanish Louisiana. Opelousas Post was young. Land meant power. Property meant survival. Freedom existed here, but it existed inside a system of conditions, contracts, petitions, instruments, technicalities. Paper mattered. What was written and how it was written could determine whether you stood as a person or as property. And in this colony, the difference between those two was often decided in ink. Marguerite was not alone in this story. Joseph Grégoire Guillory, her former master, was dead. His legitimate children now controlled his estate, land, livestock, and people. Among them, Marguerite and her 4 children. Children Grégoire had fathered. Children he had once declared free, now claimed again as property, by their own siblings, bearing nearly identical names. This was no longer a private arrangement. It was inheritance. It was valuation. It was ownership transferred on paper. And once ink passes from father to heir, intent no longer matters. Only record does. The question now is simple. Which record will stand? All right, here's how it all went down. Opelousas Post, 1781. The colony was still young. Authority sat behind a table, and Marguerite's status was now a matter of record. The heirs did not deny the relationship. They did not deny the children. They did not deny that a document had been recorded in 1770. They argued that it was invalid. The act had been drafted by a local schoolmaster, not by a qualified official empowered to perform a manumission. Under Spanish legal standards, that defect mattered. They further argued that in 1773 their father had legally conveyed Marguerite and her 4 children to them in settlement of their mother's estate. Their value, 2,000 livres. If the 1770 document was flawed, then the 1773 conveyance stood. And if the conveyance stood, she was their lawful property. This was not an argument about affection. It was not an argument about paternity. It was an argument about validity, about authority, about whether ink had been placed in the proper hands. The court would debate it. The heirs would enforce it. And the record would preserve it. Years later, when that record was studied again, the pattern drew attention. The dates told a complicated story. April 1770, Grégoire declares her free. Then in December, 7 months later, the act is finally recorded, drafted not by a notary, but by a schoolmaster. 1773. He legally conveys her and her 4 children to his legitimate heirs. And near his death, After abducting her at knife point from his son's home, he frees her again. That pattern raises a quiet question. Did Grégoire intend the first act to stand? Or did Grégoire intend to appease Marguerite, to offer what appeared to be freedom, while quietly preserving a legal escape through a document he knew would not stand? We cannot know. But whatever Grégoire intended, his heirs acted. They did not wait for the High Court in Havana to respond. January 20th, 1781. In New Orleans, Claude Guillory files a criminal complaint. He reports a runaway slave. Her name, Marguerite. She is said to be living in the city, working, employed by a man named Miguel Barre. The court responds. Marguerite is arrested. Miguel Barre is arrested. Both are placed in prison. The cell closes. The argument over paper becomes an argument over possession. For a moment, the heir's claim stands unchallenged. Then Marguerite produces a document. Not an argument. Not a plea. Paper. A certified copy of the 1770 Act of Emancipation. Recorded in New Orleans. Signed. Entered into the archive. She presents it. Calmly. The court examines it. The seal. The signatures. The language. I give her her freedom, as well as that of her children, on condition that she serves me up to my death. Marguerite is released. Miguel Barre is released. For now, the paper holds. Her freedom is acknowledged. But her children remain in the household of the heirs, their status unresolved, their future negotiable. That is not freedom. It is March of 1782. She is about 53 now. Marguerite does not wait. She files her own petition. She is identified in the record as La Négresse Libre, the free negress. The court language recognizes her status. She is no longer defending herself. She is on the offense, initiating. And in her petition, she writes that her 4 children, by virtue of the Act of Emancipation, should now be enjoying their freedom. Instead, she writes, they suffer under the power of the Guillory heirs, who are unwilling to free them. She accuses them of seeking to remove her children from the colony in secret, to alienate them, quietly. She asks the court to order the heirs to appear, to defend their claim, and if they fail, that they be declared usurpers of the freedom of her children. Read that again. Usurpers, not heirs, not protectors of an estate. Usurpers. Marguerite says they are infringing unlawfully on the rights of her children. This is not desperation. This is not the language of a defeated woman. This is a legal counterattack. This is procedural combat. She invokes authority. She demands appearance. She leverages the governor's power. She understands the language of the system, and she uses it. The court hears her petition. The Act of Emancipation is examined again. The arguments are weighed. Procedure follows procedure. Notices are sent to the heirs. Authority is invoked. And in the end, Marguerite's freedom is recognized. She stands in the record as free. It is entered. It is acknowledged. But her children do not walk out beside her. Their freedom is not denied. It is negotiated. It is April 5th, 1783. A year has passed, and the court finally decides. The court orders the following terms: 600 pesos, 150 credited through the labor of her son, Jean-Baptiste, 2 years and 2 months in service, 150 to be paid in cash, 50 more within 3 months, and the remaining 250 within 2 years. When the full amount is paid, the heirs agree to grant freedom to Marie, Joseph, Jean-Baptiste, and Catherine. Freedom structured like debt. Freedom measured in labor. Freedom payable in installments. Not mercy. Transaction. 600 pesos. 2 years of labor. Installments counted in months. And when the final sum is paid, her children are declared free. Marguerite is free. Her children will be free. But freedom did not arrive like grace. It arrived like a contract. Stamped. Witnessed. Settled. She fought within the system that confined her. The law tried to define her, to condition her freedom, to price it in pesos, to measure it in labor. But she did not disappear inside its language. She used it, filed petitions, produced instruments, compelled appearance, demanded recognition. And the irony is this: the paper meant to contain her became the paper that preserved her. Her name, her claim, her will. Then, 2 centuries later, a descendant of Marguerite would stand in a Louisiana courtroom. She would produce photographs, blue eyes, family albums, 3 generations deep. And she would say, "Look at me. I'm white.